talk about the Torah portion for a little bit. So the Torah portion, the parsha, is called Vayigash. And Vayigash, it comes again in the middle of the story. It's kind of the end of the story, but let's kind of give you a recap in case you haven't been watching this whole thing unfold. We're talking about Joseph. And you remember Joseph because he's the one with the Technicolor Dreamcoat. And Joseph, his brothers, in the beginning of his story, are so angry with him because he has these dreams and he's dreaming that everybody's bowing down to him, and it just really makes him angry. And the father is giving him this really cool jacket, sort of like Fonzarelli, and they're all hateful and they're angry and they want to kill him, but instead they sell him into slavery. That was much kinder. After a series of ups and downs in the midst of all of these challenges in Joseph's life, eventually he becomes second in command in Egypt, which was a great empire. And Joseph's brothers are still in Canaan with their father Jacob, and there's a famine in the land. Now, the way that Joseph becomes second in command, second only to Pharaoh. And remember, Pharaoh isn't just king. Pharaoh's God for the Egyptians. So when Pharaoh needs some help to understand his own dreams, somebody on his staff remembers somebody else from prison, that's Joseph, says that Joseph's a good interpreter and brings Joseph out, and Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams properly. And takes none of the credit, says it's all about God. Okay. So then Pharaoh hires Joseph, again, second in command, vice president of all of Egypt. And when there is this famine, the brothers, the rest of the family, are struggling in Canaan. And like lots of people, folks were going to Egypt and trying to get some assistance. Well, they show up and they're brought in front of Joseph, but they don't recognize Joseph. This has been years now, and Joseph is dressed like Egyptian royalty. He probably has the makeup that we're used to seeing. He has a headdress on. They're not used to seeing him, and they wouldn't have even thought he was alive. But Joseph remembered them. And because he remembered them, he was starting to get angry, it seems, and he creates this trick. He creates a test, really, to see how are they going to respond when they're put in a similar position. We haven't gotten to the Torah portion yet. This is just the background. So we have this test, and they were going to see what happens. Joseph was going to see what happens with the youngest brother, Benjamin. Benjamin and Joseph have the same mom. That's Rachel. Rachel is Jacob's, that's the love of his life. And Joseph wanted to test what were they going to do, because he was going to create a scenario where Benjamin would be held captive as a slave, sort of like ransom. Would they step up for Benjamin the way they did not for Joseph? That's the test. These brothers were angry when they were young, and they did something terrible, and it seemed like they have remorse later. And at the end of all of that introduction, we get to this Torah portion. And it's pretty close to the beginning where we see the real test. What's going to happen? And the brothers come forward to Joseph and say, we're not going to let Benjamin go. We're not going to leave him there. They're going to approach Joseph, and they're going to defend Benjamin. And Joseph is so overwhelmed, he tells all of the staff to get out of the room, and he fills up with this emotion, and he reveals himself. He shares who he is. I'm your brother. It's a really dramatic scene. No wonder there's a Broadway show. Everybody is shocked by this. His brothers are, they're kind of stuck in their ways. And what's going to happen next? Well, they're probably worried because now he is very powerful and they all remember right away what they did to him. But then Joseph seeks to comfort these brothers, the ones he hasn't seen in more than a decade. And he says, there was a purpose to what happened to me, and none of us knew it at the time when they put Joseph into the pit and sold him into slavery. And Joseph tells them that even though they did something terrible, which they did something terrible. Joseph says that it wasn't really about them, it was about God. God sent him ahead so that he, Joseph, would be able to save not just his family, but all of the people of Egypt and the people in the region. The Torah says, "Thus God sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival in the land and to sustain you for this monumental deliverance. And now it was not you who sent me here," he says. It was God. God has made me father to Pharaoh, master of his entire household, ruler throughout the land of Egypt. It has nothing to do with them. Now, for those who hang out here a lot, know that that's not my theology. It's their theology. I understand that. And there's still a message for us to be able to take in for ourselves today. There's a message for us. Because some of us might say, God sent Joseph to suffer in order to get to this place so that he can save everybody. That's kind of hard for me. We can talk about that later. But there's another gem in this text, and it's not just about the forgiveness of his brothers. He took his life's experiences. Joseph took his experiences. He reflects upon them, and he finds meaning, even in the suffering. He finds purpose and how he should move forward because of his life's experiences. He's looking back with what one rabbi calls a kind of spiritual 20/20 hindsight, and we decide what those experiences mean. You and I do. We figure out where we have been, what has happened to us, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. And we figure out where do we go from here, not to stay in the pit, not to stay in a confining place like a slavery. There's a rabbi in Los Angeles. It was a teacher of mine when I was a kid. His name is Stephen Carr Rubin. And he wrote, each of us has the chance over and over in our lives to transcend difficult experiences of our pasts, to find a renewed sense of purpose and meaning in our relationships, in our struggles, in our triumphs, even in our tragedies. Perhaps that's the real lesson of this Torah portion, that we're not trapped by our past, that we are not doomed to attach only one set of meanings to what happened to us and to the choices that we get to make moving forward. I think that is true for us. We reflect, we look back, we examine, and then we get to dream. The way that Joseph dreamed, even the way that Pharaoh dreamed. That there's going to be a time, even if they couldn't understand the dreams at those moments, it becomes clearer later on that it was for a better future. We have to examine and reflect, and I don't think it's just us as individuals. It's also us as a community. In case you haven't noticed, the congregation's changing. And thankfully, in a kind of a beautiful way, it's also growing again. In our recent conversations with our board, we're just shy of 520 households again. So why is that? People moving to Boulder? That can't be it. People looking for something? I think so. I think that we want to be moved. I think we want to be touched. We are looking for meaning the same way as our ancestors and our matriarchs and patriarchs were. But if we're looking for meaning, in order to find it, we have to look backwards to see where we've been, to learn about who we are, in order to determine where we're going. And that's true for you, it's true for me, and it's true for an us, even for the synagogue. When we look ahead, it's about having a vision for where we're going. And for the last few months, once a month, I've been sharing in my sermons somehow a connection to this new vision statement. Not because I'm proud of it, which we are, but because I think it's really powerful. There's good Torah in that document that we worked and stretched for several months to try and figure out where we are going, because how do we take care of our congregants? How do our congregants take care of each other if we don't really know where we've been and where we're going? So I know that we've given you the handout, and this is going to keep showing up in the next few months. Where are we going? I think it's a good vision. I think it's attainable. I think we have good people leading. Everybody's looking at the test now. That's fine. but with also good partners, with you as partners, with a desire to nurture inspiration, not just to grow membership, but to have people feel the possibility, the potential of being transformed. I think that's what we're starting to encounter here again. Now remember, the whole Joseph story is filled with these visions. Joseph's in the beginning, seeing his place in the world, but not being mature enough to really recognize its significance. Pharaoh's dream again. He needed a partner to interpret so that they could strategize, saving everyone in the region. Well, we have dreams too, to try and figure out what God wants of us and to walk in God's ways, whatever that might mean for you. We are looking to connect, engage, inspire, and challenge. We want to be a source of support and compassion and friendship and fellowship. We want a synagogue to make a difference in our lives and to strengthen us to make a difference in the lives of others, our neighbors. We want to build bridges and grow understanding between one another, to our fellow Jews around the world, and yes, to Israel. And we want Congregation Har Hashem to be a spiritual center that will help us walk in God's ways. And there are many ways to walk. But in order to dream, we need to look back and see where we've been. So I want to make this transition also to celebrate our past a little bit. Because in order to dream, we need to know where we've been. So the congregation now is more than 50 years old, and there have been many congregants that have helped to raise up generations of Jews. They've helped to provide leadership in helping vulnerable in our community, the homeless in particular. We have helped to rescue refugees, yes, refugee girls from Darfur, who are still in the area, by the way, creating their own families and going to school, contributing to our society in safety. And even before that, helping others with bolder action for Soviet Jewry and welcoming people who are trying to leave an oppressed state. There have been decades of love here. Love of Judaism, love of community, love of the synagogue. And there's also been a lot of love for Rabbi Bronstein. It's true. Now, I've heard incredible stories of our Rabbi Emerita, by the way. Rabbi Deborah Ruth Bronstein. And as everything that I can kind of gather, she was kind of a strong force here in the congregation before her retirement. A strong, some of you remember that because I hear it. A strong leader advocating for justice and advocating for care. And there has been much love in return. Now there's also love within the synagogue for not just the rabbi, but also for our fellow congregants. And one of them is Olga. Olga Plum is here, and Misha Plum is here. And they have been longtime members. But Olga also is an internationally renowned still life artist, and again, a congregant here. She has this, by the way, a beautiful exhibit in the Boulder Community Hospital, on the Arapahoe, and there's a permanent display that it has incredible pieces from her work. And Olga and Misha are beloved congregants. Now, they left the Soviet Union after a long time, as I understand it, trying to get a visa. For some of us, we remember the Refusnik issue. It was a devastating thing in the Jewish community. It was hard to be Jewish, and it was hard to leave and find a safer place. And yet they made it earlier than many, perhaps most, really most, in 1976, to arrive in this country and make their home in Boulder. Now, with all of their love here in the congregation and their love for Rabbi Bronstein, and for her in particular, Olga, to share her artistic gifts, the Plums are donating a painting that Olga created of our Rabbi Emerita that is going to be hanging in the office wing shortly. We're painting and changing some carpets. You'll love it. But after that, we're going to be hanging up this wonderful portrait. So for the three of you, I'm going to invite you to come forward. And we have the painting up here, and it's time to show you. We're grateful for Olga's gifts. We're grateful for Olga and Misha's presence, for Rabbi Bronstein's years of leadership, including in retirement. And I'm going to ask Rabbi Bronstein to share a few words here. You want to come be with her? You want to take him out and elbow? Okay, good.
So, first of all, I want to thank you, Olga, for your beautiful work. It's a gift to the synagogue, it's a gift to me, and it moves me greatly. It means a lot to me. And Misha, I want to thank you for all your support of Olga over all these years in her artistry, and your support of me, and your support of the congregation. From the very start, the Plums and I had an immediate connection. We talked about important Jewish ideas, Jewish experiences, and we shared blessed moments together. And this is the way of Har Hashem, not just with the three of us. We build deep bonds with each other. Our relationships are real, and that is what makes this a true congregation. Olga chose to paint me in a beautiful white talit. I'm not sure she knows the story of the white talit from Jerusalem. And I'd like to tell you all the story of this talit. I started rabbinical school in 1983, and I'm sure it's still the case. Rabbi Green could let us know. When at the beginning, over the summer, or at the end of the summer, we study, and then we're invited to participate in leading high holiday services. And about 3 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, the man who was teaching us trope said, you know, you have to wear a talit when you come up to the bima. So for the guys, this was no big deal, because they'd all been given talitot for their bar mitzvahs. And that was it. But there were a few of us women, and in those days, women didn't wear talitot. And so we had to go searching Jerusalem for someone who would sell us a talit. And so the idea was that you would go into a store, and the guy would say, who is this for? And you would say, for my father or for my brother, and they would sell you a talit. But I did not want to buy a talit with a lie. And so I would say it was for me, and there'd be rows of talitot hanging behind them, and they would say, we don't sell talitot here. And so I was getting really desperate because it was close to Rosh Hashanah, and so finally I wandered into this tiny little store with this really old, beautiful man with a beautiful white beard, and he said, what can I help you with? And I said, I'm looking for a talit. And he said, who is it for? And I said, it's for someone who really wants to pray in it. And he got this great smile on his face and a twinkle in his eye, and he said, I have the talit you want. And he sold me that talit. And I have to say, praying in that talit opened my heart in new ways. So my prayer for us is that each of us find ways for our hearts to open up in prayer or in learning or in community or to God, and that this be a place where this happens. And it's been this way for me, and I hope it will be this way for you.
Amen.
So this is the palette here on the portrait.
Yes.
So let's take time to reflect on our week, our year, our lives. Consider how we can find new meanings from our lives, how we can take what we've learned, where we have been, begin to dream and build and love. Let us